Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Mob Psycho 100, Season 1, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Where we're picking up where the last episode left off, where Risu ends up running into Dimple, and Dimple explains like, okay, I was nothing but particles, but I was able to bring myself back together, but I'd already lost a lot of my spiritual energy after fighting Mob, and after what happened with Taruki, I lost even more. And so he brought up something that I thought was so interesting, where he's basically like, low level spirits around the same level as him can't even go inside of Mob's house just because Shigeo lives there. So I was just like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, he has had his powers since he was a kid, so I guess he radiates so much spiritual energy that it's basically stained the house. So it's almost like where you would normally have to, you have to like sanctify a house or something like that. Shigeo's very existence just did that without him trying. It seems like that's what implying. So like that's why he's not dealing with weaker spirits on a regular basis. The fact is that he's able to go in the house later on. I don't know if that's just because Dimple's in the presence of Risu, or is it just because enough time has passed now that he's able to now come into the house. Like he had to wait until he got enough spiritual energy. So he's probably been trying ever since Taruki Day, maybe pretty soon after he immediately popped back, but he couldn't actually go into Shigeo's house because of that, or maybe it's only just recently that he was able to pop it. Whatever the case may be, he's able to come in now, and obviously it's like, well, I couldn't get to Mob, but maybe I could get to Risu, because it's like, well, he's weaker than Mob and he hasn't really got control of his power, so he tries to possess him, but he's so low on the totem pole now that yes, he can possess and actually activate Risu's powers. Like all of Risu's powers are very latent, heightened emotions makes it come out. Whereas like obviously like that's where Mob's powers really come out, but he has a lot more free control to use however much or little as he wants, but until his emotions completely pop and then like he goes 100% and stuff. But Risu can't even go to the average level of power unless Dimple possesses him. So that becomes like the staple of the episode, and it coincides because Dimple starts noticing like, oh, like have you been going through some stuff recently? Like, you know, did you like basically poop your pants in front of a whole class or something? Like, did you go through something bad? Because your emotions are what's kind of driving your powers to come out. And it's coinciding with all the stuff he did with Shinji, where it's like they are causing havoc at the school. It didn't just stop with Onigawara. Now they've kind of started doing it to other people too. One by one, they're quote unquote cleaning up the school, and Shinji is getting like high off of it and enjoying it, whereas it's eating away at Risu, but that guilt and contempt he feels for himself is actually making him stronger. So there's such a like, what would be the word I'm looking for? There's such a complicated dichotomy there, where it's just like, cool, the worse I feel and the more powerful I'm getting, but we do see that it is slowly but surely corrupting him, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. We're talking about something he's been aiming for a good chunk of his life. Ever since he found out his brother had powers, he's wanted them too, and he always felt less, and he probably tries not to like let it consume him, like, oh, I just want to be like my brother, but it's like the moment Dimple was like, oh, you could surpass, you know, Shigeo, and he's like, surpass him, but then he tried to be like, I could be like my brother. It's like, no, he wants to be more. And I think for so long that's the thing of like, he could want to be like his brother in a very envious and mild-mannered way, where it's like, okay, you could be a little envious and not being, you know, completely consumed with jealousy, but it seems like that jealousy has been contorted. I mean, you could make the argument it was always there and it was always contorted, and maybe it's just what's always been buried deep within Risu is bubbling to the surface, just like Mob when he pops, you know? So maybe there's like a correlation that could be drawn there. Speaking of Mob, I love his circumstances this episode. This lady brought him in, and it was about this this particular vase. I thought it was like a genie thing that was going on, like the way she was trying to get him to rub it. I was like, is it possessed by a spirit? You're trying to get it to awaken? But no, it was a con artist thing, a con thing of they're trying to get him to like break it so that they could charge him for it. And they're like, oh, your mom like must have 500,000, so you could get her to buy it. And Mob thought about the family's income. He's like, no, that's not gonna happen. She accidentally bumps it and makes it fall, but Shigeo catches it. I was like, oh, well, that lucked out. But just as he was putting it back, she hit him and he cracked it. Now this other dude show up chastising Mob like, oh, you're just gonna say it was her fault, huh? But luckily, Mob ended up calling, it takes one bullshitter to outclass another bullshitter. And oh boy, our boy Regan is the best bullshitter around. Because I love the moment he came to this situation, he was like, all right, I see how it is. And he was just kind of like, and I love that he's out playing them, being like, oh, you like broke my like clavicle, like my bones. Oh my God, that's $1 million. Oh, your emotional damage, that's another $1 million. Oh my God, your breath, that's another $1 million. And just kept stacking it on and on and on and on. And it's like, cool, the amount of money I made from the loss, how I was basically suing you guys, the money I'm making from that pays for that vase, right? So cool, we're good, let's go, Mob. And then the guy's like, you think you're going to just really get out of here? And Regan was like, oh yeah, there's this spirit. This one client came into me about some evil spirit like haunting her. It followed me and now it's going to start haunting you. And the guy and the woman think he's joking. But then, because at first I was like, once all stuff started popping and getting destroyed, I was like, did Mob do that? Because even if Mob like got the go ahead from Regan, he wouldn't do something like that. I was like, oh, that seemed like very out of character for Mob. But it's like, well, Regan doesn't have any powers, so he was like, oh, that was good on you to do all that. But then Mob was like, I didn't do any of that. I assumed it was because of the evil spirit. You knew, like, you specifically sent that evil spirit on her. Oh, not unless you couldn't see. He was like, no, I could see it. Of course I could. And then just they're like, okay, Mob's just like, oh, con men, they're despicable. And I love Regan just looking to the left. Yeah, of course. It's like, yeah, the worst type of person uses another person like that. I was like, that's the thing. You're not ignorant. You're aware of how terrible you are. Cause you could but he buries his guilt so well. You can tell in that moment, but it's like that's the most guilty we've ever seen him feel about Mob, because he recognizes like, yeah, the only reason why I can help him out with con artists, I could out con a con artist because I'm a con artist myself and I'm using you, Mob. But Mob is so loyal and simple-minded when it comes to him that he's willing to take Regan at face value, even though literally every other character that's ever come across Regan is like, oh, this guy's full of shit. Literally everyone except for Mob sees him for the phony that he is. So that was just kind of like Mob's side of the episode. But yeah, I forgot to talk about what also kind of got started at the beginning of the episode too, is that because of word getting out about what happened to Taruki getting beat, now it's led to Mob having a reputation. He's got a nickname, White Tea Poison, which immediately my brain almost thinks of and it's fresh in my mind because of the anime. Though the anime never did it, because it's only something in the webtoon manhwa, but it's the series Viral Hit, how Hoban was like known as like tank top or something, white tank top or something like that. It kind of gave me that same feeling vibe, even though I'm pretty sure the manga because definitely the anime predates Viral Hit. So I can only assume I don't know when did Viral Hit start, but I'm pretty sure like this predates that. But still, that's the example I had in my head. It immediately made me think of that. But yeah, we have all these gang leaders from all these different schools throughout Salt City deciding like, oh, we're gonna go track him down, because they only know like, oh, he's some pale skitty kid, so no one knows enough about Mob to come after him, only like that vague description, which later on makes people start crossing his path. Because so he has two groups of people after him. Risu does, well, really Mob, but Risu is being chastised by the people who blame him and Shinji for what happened to him. It's like, oh, you blackmailed us, like you planted evidence on us. And then the people who are looking for a Mob, aka White Tea Poison, and mistaking Ritsu for him. So that's really interesting. Which Risu and Shinji really quickly had this interesting conversation on the roof or whatever, where they were like, because it seemed like Shinji was almost like, oh, are you kind of having like doubts about this? And Risu's like, no, just the fact of the matter is I kind of went along with all this because I was tired of just being me, and now I get to play the role of the fool. Like, it's just like, right, I did all this bad stuff and it's benefited me, and now his personality's kind of become very distorted to the point that Dimple. But I love that, like, Dimple's not some moral compass. He's not your conscious. He's not your Jiminy Cricket to. Well, he's not. Yeah, like what Jiminy Cricket is to Pinocchio, his conscience. Like Dimple isn't that. He's like, no, I'm okay with you doing whatever stuff. I'm not going to be here to judge you because, to be fair, Dimple's an evil guy and he's probably biding his time until he can end up possessing Risu once he builds up enough power. Because, like I said, Risu starts showing stuff off, even though, like, which is so interesting considering he knows where his brother stands on that stuff, or at least you assume he does, that, oh, Mob wants nothing to do with his power. So it's like, it's just the interesting inverse of each other, that they are. Mob wants nothing to do with his power, and Risu wants everything. To be fair, Risu, I mean, I brought that point up kind of in the parallel between, not Risu, but Teruki and Mob, where they're both set the same, but both have different relationships with their powers, and now we see that same dynamic between Mob and Ritsu. But yeah, because Risu beat up one of the gang leaders and people started thinking it was Shinji got beat up in the process, which I immediately was like, oh, that's karma. I was like, oh, you were riding high, you were feeling so good, and now you're getting beat up and you're like, oh, we need to stop this. I'm like, oh, we need to stop now. Not all the people's lives you were ruining because you're trying to, oh, I'm cleaning up the school. It's like, no, you're doing this for the purpose of, like, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel powerful because you feel lesser than in every other aspect of your life because you feel inferior to your brother. Your parents make you feel inferior. Here you get to reign supreme and kind of feel that superiority for the first time. So, but now he's getting beat up repeatedly because of it. And he wants things to stop. But Risu's like, nah, we're going to keep going. And ultimately, this was what Risu was planning, because he was like, oh, it isn't just the people at school we're dealing with. You yourself. It's that thing of like, oh, now we've got to turn on each other because I recognize you've become the problem yourself, Shinji. So, like, pushed him to his breaking point. So it's like, right, you should have been here cleaning up your room instead of worrying about cleaning up at the school. So we're just going to keep going. And just now that Shinji's kind of broken, it's like, now everything is clean. It's like, yeah, Risu went full villain this episode, so. But he even recognizes with Dimple. He's like, are you trying to use me? And Dimple's like, no. What are you talking about, buddy? You know? So he ends up crossing paths with even more. The remaining gang leaders show up and try and attack him all at once, but obviously he easily defeats them. He's being watched by someone else. It seems like it's the same dude. Was that last episode, I believe? Maybe it was the episode before. I think it was last episode. When he was on his quote-unquote date with Tomei. The guy he sensed, I think it's the same guy that he's like, oh, this guy is dangerous. But whoever he is talking to, he's on the phone with someone being like, yo, I think this is the guy. I found him. I'm about to see, like, oh, like, I'll grab the guy. But it's like, oh, let me sit back and watch and see what he's really capable of. And so this is our first time actually getting to see, like, Risu fight using his powers. And so we see him just stopping everybody and then just blasting them away. I should also note, because a part of the episode I hadn't talked about, which I thought was surprising, was the fact is that we had Teruki return, which I thought was so interesting. When they first showed him, before they showed, like, the full, like, picture of him, I thought, like, oh, because his hair got buzzed, I thought he'd, like, cut his hair or something. But no, he's wearing, like, this massive, like, Marge Simpson hairstyle type hair. And I was like, oh, so are you overcompensating? Like, has your hair not... Like, I wonder, has, like, because of that situation, I wonder, has his hair, like, is it taking a very long time to grow back? Or is it going to be permanently stuck like that for whatever reason? But because I'm like, why would you go through that trouble of wearing that? It's so inconvenient. And why go so above and beyond? Maybe there's some secret thing of, yeah, that was the only one that was available or something like that. But yeah, he immediately, obviously he doesn't know Risu as Mob's brother. and and Risu doesn't recognize him as someone that Mob's going up against. You have Dimple, like, from what we said in the context of the episode, never filling him in on Taruki, but it's just kind of like, hey, don't go toe to toe with this guy, because Taruki's has a changed perspective because he had his come to Jesus moment because of his fight with Mob, where it's like, right, you shouldn't kind of like solely rely on your powers, which obviously strikes a chord with Risu of just kind of like, no, I finally have these powers, I'm gonna, do my thing with it. But he immediately gets heavily outclassed by Taruki, but Taruki got distracted because of his hair. So it's a situation of like, cool, he ended up managing to run away, and that was like, right, I'm never going to lose again, which ties into the episode title, because at the very end, before he beat everyone, Ritsu had kind of said this whole diatribe of, hey, I don't blame you guys, I'm not here to judge you. He's like, he's making a point, let me remember like that exact phrasing. It was kind of something along the lines of, there is actually no particular reason why people stray away from the path of righteousness. They just do. And he's like, even in this moment where you guys have lost the will to fight, I am still here trying to still walk the path of violence, because he's kind of almost like, it's what he's obtained, and that's the title of the episode, was that I've obtained loss. Where just, I guess it's, with everything I've been through, it's kind of broken me, and I just kind of recognize now, like, oh, I don't know, Risu just sounds a little crazy, because once again, I never fully understood his reasoning for going along with Shinji in the first place. I kind of kept, not that it's justifiable, but in Risu's mind, I talked about it last episode of my reasonings why he probably justifies working with Shinji, but it's just, I didn't quite get the line of I've obtained loss. I guess like I've lost so much, and that loss has basically transformed me into who I am, and because I've obtained loss, I'm able to access his power. I guess like going to the whole point of, the more further he's gone down this path, the more he's strayed away, even though maybe in his mind me straying away from the path isn't actually me straying away from the path. I'm still on the path, but, or maybe he does recognize, oh, I've strayed from the path, but that's, there's never any particular reason, but I've obtained my loss of my path, and maybe my loss of myself when it comes to this power. But easily defeats everybody. But then we have the stinger at the very end where Shigeo comes across his brother. So just based on the title and small glimpses I saw of the preview, it seems like the two brothers are going to clash. And how that's going to play out, well, as we know, Mob does not want to fight back against anyone, especially when it turns out to be his brother. So he's going to have an extra reservation about fighting back. But let's not also forget, there is the dude that's watching this fight too. So how this all plays out, what the conclusion to it will be, we'll ultimately have to wait to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.